The howling wind cut through the night like a knife as Madeline Zimmerman clutched her 6-month-old daughter to her chest, their last fragment of warmth shared between them as they huddled against the merciless Nevada blizzard of 1871. The stagecoach that had abandoned them on the desolate trail to Rawhide was long gone, leaving nothing but fading tracks in the rapidly accumulating snow and the bitter taste of betrayal in Madeline's mouth. "Hush now, Emma," Madeline whispered, her lips blue with cold as she tried to tuck the thin blanket more securely around her daughter's tiny form. "Mama's going to find us shelter." But the vast expanse of white blanketed wilderness stretched endlessly in every direction. Madeline had been walking for what felt like hours, her boots soaked through, her fingers numb. The letter from her late husband's cousin promising work and lodging in Rawhide was still tucked in her coat pocket, a dream of a new beginning that now seemed cruelly distant. Emma's whimpers grew weaker, which frightened Madeline more than her cries had. The snow was falling faster now, building up on her shoulders, dusting her eyelashes. Her strength was failing, each step more laborious than the last. "Just a little farther," she promised, though she had no idea where she was leading them. The darkness was nearly complete, with only occasional glimpses of moonlight breaking through the clouds to illuminate the barren landscape. When her knees finally buckled, Madeline managed to twist her body to protect Emma from the impact. She lay there, the snow embracing her like a cold grave, too exhausted to rise again. Tears froze on her cheeks as she curled her body around her daughter. "I'm so sorry, my love," she whispered, pressing her lips to Emma's forehead. The sound came so faintly at first that Madeline thought she'd imagined it the distant crunching of snow under hooves. Then came the soft nickering of a horse, growing louder. Summoning her last reserves of strength, Madeline pushed herself to her knees. "Help!" she cried, her voice barely carrying on the wind. "Please help us." The dark silhouette of a rider appeared through the curtain of snow, and for a moment, Madeline feared it was a hallucination born of desperation. But then the horse came closer, and she could make out a broad-shouldered man wrapped in a heavy coat, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots landing with a soft thud in the snow. His approach was cautious, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "Madam," his voice was deep and rough from disuse, "what in God's name are you doing out here?" "The stagecoach," Madeline managed, teeth chattering violently. "They wouldn't wait. Said we were slowing them down, my baby." The stranger crouched beside her, his weathered face coming into view as he tilted his hat back. His eyes were the color of the summer sky, startling in their intensity as they assessed her condition, then moved to the bundle in her arms. "You got a name?" he asked, already shrugging off his coat to wrap around her shoulders. Madeline Zimmerman. This is Emma." The man's expression hardened as he glanced in the direction the stagecoach had gone, then softened as he looked back at mother and child. "I'm Gabriel York," he said, gently helping her to her feet. "You can call me Gabe." He peered down at Emma, whose tiny face was peeking out from the blankets, her eyes wide and solemn. "Storm's getting worse. My place is about 2 miles from here." "I can't walk that far," Madeline admitted, swaying on her feet. Without a word, Gabe lifted her into his arms, cradling both her and Emma against his chest. The sudden warmth of his body was so overwhelming that Madeline felt tears spring to her eyes again. He settled her carefully onto his horse, then mounted behind her, one arm securing her and Emma against him while the other took the reins. "You're both safe now," he said, his breath warm against her ear as he turned the horse toward home. Then, with a certainty that sent an unexpected flutter through Madeline's frozen heart, he added, "You're both mine now." The journey to Gabriel York's homestead passed in a blur of numbness and growing warmth as Madeline leaned against his solid chest, feeling his heart beat steadily against her back. Emma had stopped crying, lulled by the rhythmic motion of the horse and the shelter of their bodies. "Almost there," Gabe said after a time, his voice rumbling through Madeline. Ahead, a pinprick of light slowly expanded into the warm glow of a cabin window. It ain't much, but it's sturdy. As they drew closer, Madeline could make out a substantial log cabin with smoke curling from its stone chimney, a barn to one side, and a corral where several horses huddled together against the storm. It was modest, but well kept, the home of a man who took pride in his work. Gabe dismounted first, then lifted Madeline and Emma down with careful hands. He led them to the porch, stomping snow from his boots before pushing open the door to reveal a surprisingly cozy interior. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, dominated by a large stone fireplace where flames danced merrily, casting golden light over rough-hewn furniture. A table with 4 chairs stood near a cast-iron stove, and shelves lined one wall, stocked with provisions. 2 doors led off the main room bedrooms, Madeline presumed. "Let's get you both warmed up," Gabe said, guiding her to a chair by the fire. He moved with efficiency, stoking the flames before fetching a thick quilt from a chest. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to Emma. After a moment's hesitation, Madeline nodded, allowing him to take her daughter while she wrapped the quilt around herself. Gabe handled Emma with surprising gentleness for such large, calloused hands. "She's a pretty little thing," he observed, smiling slightly as Emma grabbed at his finger. "How old?" 6 months, Madeline replied, watching him closely. "She's small for her age," he nodded, not pressing for details, and returned Emma to her mother's arms. "I'll make some coffee and heat some stew. When's the last time you ate?" Madeline couldn't remember. The day before, perhaps. Money had been scarce since her husband's death, and she'd been saving what little she had left for their new start in Rawhide. "I have some milk stored in the cold room," Gabe continued, moving to the stove. "Not fresh from the cow, but it might do for the little one if you mix it with some water." Madeline watched him move around the kitchen, his movements precise and practiced. "You seem comfortable with children," she observed. A shadow passed over his face. "Had a sister with young ones," he said shortly, then changed the subject. "What business did you have in Rawhide?" "My husband's cousin owns the mercantile there. After Thomas died last spring, he offered me work and a place to stay." She hesitated, then added, "I was a seamstress before I married. I thought I could be useful." Gabe nodded, setting a steaming mug of coffee in front of her. "Rawhide's about 15 miles south. Storm like this travels impossible for at least a few days." He hesitated, then added gruffly, "You're welcome to stay until the weather breaks." "Thank you," Madeline said, the enormity of his kindness hitting her suddenly. "If not for you." "Don't dwell on it," he interrupted, uncomfortable with her gratitude. Anyone would have done the same, but they both knew that wasn't true. The stagecoach driver and the other passengers had left her and Emma to die rather than be delayed. As the stew heated, Gabe disappeared into one of the back rooms, returning with a small wooden box. He placed it on the table and opened it to reveal neatly folded baby clothes, simple gowns, caps, and tiny socks. "These were my nieces," he explained at Madeline's questioning look. "My sister left them when she moved on. Reckon they might fit your girl." Madeline touched the soft fabric reverently. "You're very kind, Mr. York." "Gabe," he corrected, ladling stew into a bowl for her. "Just Gabe." Later, after Madeline had eaten and Emma was changed and fed, Gabe showed them to the smaller of the 2 bedrooms. It was simply furnished with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a rocking chair by the window. "This was my sister's room," he explained. "She made it nice." Indeed, there were feminine touches: curtains at the window, a colorful quilt on the bed, a rag rug on the floor. "Where is your sister now?" Madeline asked carefully, noting the past tense when he spoke of her. Gabe's expression closed off. "California, with her husband." He turned away, gesturing to the bed. "Get some rest, you're safe here." As he left, closing the door softly behind him, Madeline sat on the edge of the bed, Emma drowsing in her arms. "You're both mine now," he'd said when he found them. Strange words from a stranger, yet they hadn't frightened her. Instead, they'd offered a promise of protection when she'd needed it most. She laid Emma in the middle of the bed, creating a barrier of pillows to keep her from rolling off, then curled up beside her daughter. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, but inside, they were warm and sheltered. Madeline's last thought before sleep claimed her was that perhaps guardian angels sometimes came in the form of stern-faced cowboys with kind hands and guarded eyes. Madeline woke to sunshine streaming through the curtains and the unfamiliar sound of someone moving quietly in another room. For a moment, disorientation gripped her. This wasn't the cramped boarding house room in St. Louis, nor was it the stagecoach or the freezing snowbank. Then memory returned in a rush. The abandonment, the cold, the cowboy who'd rescued them. Emma still slept beside her, pink-cheeked and peaceful. Madeline touched her daughter's face gently, thanking God for the miracle of their survival. A soft knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Zimmerman. Gabe's deep voice came through the wood. "There's hot coffee and breakfast when you're ready." "Thank you," she called back. "I'll be out shortly." Madeline found her clothes now dry, folded neatly on the chest of drawers. She dressed quickly, then lifted a still sleeping Emma and carried her into the main room. Daylight transformed the cabin, revealing details she'd missed the night before. The walls were decorated with a few simple paintings of landscapes. The furniture, though functional, showed fine craftsmanship, and the large windows framed a breathtaking view of snow-covered mountains. Gabe stood at the stove, his back to her. He'd changed into a clean flannel shirt, and his dark hair was damp as if freshly washed. Without his coat and hat, she could see that he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30 or so, just a few years older than her 26 years. "Good morning," she said softly. He turned, and Madeline was struck again by the vivid blue of his eyes, a startling contrast to his tanned face and the dark stubble along his jaw. "Morning," he replied, gesturing to the table where he'd set out plates of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. "Hope you're hungry." "Famished," she admitted, settling Emma in her lap as she sat. "I can't thank you enough for your hospitality," Gabe shrugged, pouring coffee for them both. "Like I said, anyone would have done the same, but they didn't," Madeline pointed out quietly. "You did." He looked uncomfortable with her praise and changed the subject. "Storm's blown itself out, but there's near 3 feet of snow on the ground. Road to Rawhide won't be passable for at least a week, maybe more." Madeline nodded, digesting this information. A week in the company of this stranger who'd already seen her at her most vulnerable. "I don't want to impose, you're not," he interrupted firmly. "I've got plenty of room and provisions." As if on cue, Emma woke with a whimper that quickly escalated to a hungry wail. Madeline bounced her gently, looking around for somewhere to prepare her daughter's breakfast. "I've got that milk warming," Gabe said, retrieving a small pot from the back of the stove. "And there's a proper baby bottle in that drawer belonged to my niece. Clean it first, though." Madeline was surprised yet again by his preparedness. "You've thought of everything." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not everything, but I try to be practical." While Madeline fed Emma, Gabe ate his breakfast in companionable silence. When he finished, he rose and donned his coat. "Need to check the livestock and clear some paths," he explained. "Make yourself at home. There's books on that shelf if you get bored." After he left, Madeline explored the cabin more thoroughly. The main room was as she'd observed earlier, kitchen and living area combined, comfortable without being luxurious. The second bedroom, clearly Gabe's, was Spartan but neat, with a larger bed, a wardrobe, and a desk covered in papers. She didn't pry further, respecting his privacy. The back door led to a lean-to addition that served as a washroom, with a large metal tub, pump, and shelves holding soap and towels. Another door from there opened into a cold storage room dug partially into the hillside, its shelves stocked with preserved foods, root vegetables, and crocks of dairy. It was a bachelor's home, practical and functional, but touches throughout revealed care and craft, hand-carved details on the furniture, carefully preserved foodstuffs, the small collection of books that included poetry as well as practical manuals. When Gabe returned mid-morning, his cheeks ruddy from exertion and cold, Madeline had Emma bathed and dressed in one of the gowns he'd provided, and was examining a tear in her own coat. "Need a needle and thread?" he asked, hanging his coat by the door. "If you have them," she replied. He fetched a sewing basket from a cupboard, another remnant of his sister's presents. Madeline guessed and set it beside her. "You mentioned you were a seamstress," he said, pouring himself fresh coffee. Madeline nodded, selecting a needle and suitable thread. "In St. Louis, before I married Thomas. I made dresses for ladies who could afford them and mended for those who couldn't." "Valuable skill out here," Gabe observed. "Nearest dressmakers in Carson City, and most women in these parts make do with what they have or order from catalogs." As she worked on her coat, Gabe sat at his desk, writing in what appeared to be a ledger. The scratching of his pen and the crackling of the fire created a soothing backdrop as Emma played on a blanket at Madeline's feet. "You have a fine home," Madeline said eventually, breaking the comfortable silence. "Have you been in Nevada long?" Gabe glanced up from his ledger. "Since '65, after the war, came west looking for a fresh start like most everyone else. You fought in the war?" Madeline asked cautiously, aware that such questions could open old wounds. He nodded once, his expression closing slightly. "Union cavalry, don't much care to speak of it." "Of course," she said quickly. "My husband was in the 8th Missouri Infantry. He came home, but—" She trailed off, not wanting to elaborate on how the war had changed Thomas, how the cough he'd brought back with him had eventually taken his life, leaving her a widow with an infant. "This land's good for new beginnings," Gabe said after a moment. "No one much cares what side you fought on, long as you work hard and mind your business." "And what is your business, Gabe?" Madeline asked, genuinely curious. "Horse breeding, mostly," he replied, warming to the subject. "Got a small herd of quarter horses I'm developing for ranch work. Sell to outfits all through Nevada and parts of California." "Is that what brought you out in the storm? Your horses?" He nodded. "Had a mare close to foaling, wanted to check on her." A small smile touched his lips. "Got a healthy colt now, born just before I found you." "So it was a night for new life," Madeline observed softly. Their eyes met briefly across the room, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of how differently the night might have ended without his intervention. "Guess so," he agreed, then returned to his ledger. The days fell into a rhythm as the snow gradually receded. Gabe would rise early to tend to his horses and the few cattle he kept, then return for breakfast. Madeline, determined not to be a burden, took over the cooking and household tasks, finding satisfaction in caring for someone besides Emma after months of grief and struggle. On the third day, when Gabe returned from his morning chores, Madeline presented him with fresh bread, still warm from the oven. "Where'd you find flour?" he asked, surprised. "In the cold room," she replied. "I hope you don't mind, I wanted to contribute something." He broke off a piece, steam rising as he did, and tasted it. His eyes closed briefly in appreciation. "Been a long while since I had homemade bread. Store-bought's not the same." "My mother taught me to bake when I was a girl," Madeline explained, pleased by his reaction. "Said it was a sure way to a man's heart." The words slipped out before she could consider their implication, and a flush rose to her cheeks. Gabe looked momentarily startled, then a slow smile spread across his face, the first full smile she'd seen from him. "Your mother was a wise woman," he said simply, reaching for another piece. That evening, while Emma slept and snow fell gently outside, they sat by the fire. Gabe was carving what looked like a small wooden horse, his large hands surprisingly deft with the delicate work. Madeline had found mending in a basket shirts with torn seams, socks with holes, and was steadily working through the pile. "You don't need to do that," Gabe said, noticing her activity. "I want to," she replied. "It's the least I can do for your kindness." He was silent for a moment, knife paused in his work. "Was he good to you? Your husband?" The question surprised her. "Thomas? Yes, in his way. The war changed him as it did many men. He was distant sometimes, but he never raised a hand to me, and he was pleased when Emma came." That's something, Gabe acknowledged. Were you ever married? Madeline asked, emboldened by his personal question. No. The word was clipped final, but after a moment he elaborated slightly. Came close once before the war, didn't work out. Madeline sensed there was more to the story but didn't press. And your sister? You mentioned she moved to California, a shadow crossed his face. Sarah. She lived here with me and her children after her husband died in a mining accident in '67. Remarried 2 years ago, a shopkeeper from Sacramento, took the children with her. You miss them, Madeline observed gently. The children, yes. His knife resumed its movement, shaving thin curls of wood from the carving. Matthew would be 10 now and little Rebecca 7. Sarah writes occasional letters, sends drawings the children make. He nodded toward several papers pinned to the wall that Madeline had assumed were maps. That's why you had the baby clothes and bottle, Madeline realized. From when Rebecca was small, Gabe nodded. Sarah left in a hurry. Didn't take everything? His tone suggested there was more to that story as well. It must be lonely here, Madeline ventured. He looked up, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. He corrected softly, was lonely. The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge fully. Madeline bent her head over her mending again, but a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire spread through her chest. The week stretched into 10 days as another, smaller storm passed through, further delaying travel to Rawhide. Madeline found herself less and less anxious about the delay. The comfortable routine they'd established breakfast together, each attending to their daily tasks. Evenings by the fire had begun to feel like something close to home. Gabe had shown her his horses, pride evident in his voice as he introduced each animal and explained their lineage and training. The new colt, spindly-legged and curious, had approached Madeline fearlessly, sniffing at Emma, who squealed with delight at the soft muzzle tickling her fingers. He likes you, Gabe observed, watching them. Both of you. What will you name him? Madeline asked. Gabe considered for a moment. Hadn't thought about it. Got any suggestions? Miracle, she said without hesitation. Born in a blizzard, beating the odds like us. Miracle, he repeated thoughtfully, testing the name. Not very cowboy-like, but fitting. He smiled down at Emma, who was reaching for the colt again. Miracle it is. That night, Madeline dreamed of her late husband. In the dream, Thomas stood at the edge of a meadow, watching her with Emma in her arms. He looked healthy again, his face full and his eyes clear of pain. Be happy, Maddie, he said, using the nickname he'd given her when they courted. You deserve it. Then he turned and walked away, fading into mist. She woke with tears on her cheeks, but a strange lightness in her heart, as if some invisible burden had been lifted. From the main room came the sound of Gabe moving about, starting the day's fire. Without fully examining her motivations, Madeline rose, dressed quickly, and joined him. He looked up, surprised to see her so early. Everything all right? Yes, she said, realizing it was true. Everything is fine. The morning sun broke over the distant mountains as they stood together at the window, watching the golden light spill across the snow-covered valley. Neither spoke, but when Gabe's hand found hers, Madeline didn't pull away. It was on the 12th day, as they ate breakfast and discussed the now realistic prospect of traveling to Rawhide, that a knock came at the door, the first visitor since Madeline's arrival. Gabe opened it to reveal a weathered man in his 50s, with a gray beard and keen eyes. Sheriff Wilson, Gabe greeted him, stepping back to allow the man entry. What brings you out this way? Checking on folks after the storms, the sheriff explained, stomping snow from his boots. His gaze fell on Madeline and Emma, and his eyebrows rose. Didn't know you had company, York. Sheriff, this is Mrs. Madeline Zimmerman and her daughter Emma, Gabe introduced them formally. Their stagecoach left them stranded in the first blizzard. I found them and brought them here until travel was possible again. The sheriff nodded, his expression softening as he tipped his hat to Madeline. Madam, good thing Gabe found you weather like that. Outcomes aren't usually happy. He accepted the coffee Gabe offered him and sat at the table. was actually coming to tell you the road to Rawhide's been cleared. Stage is running again starting tomorrow. Oh, Madeline said, a peculiar emptiness opening in her chest at the news. That's good to hear. Gabe's face had gone carefully neutral. Mrs. Zimmerman has family expecting her in Rawhide, he explained to the sheriff, though his eyes were on Madeline. Well, not family exactly, Madeline corrected, suddenly unsure. My late husband's cousin, Mr. Howard Zimmerman, he owns the Mercantile and offered me work. Howie Zimmerman. The sheriff's brow furrowed. Might be a problem there, madam. His store burned down about 2 weeks ago, right before the first storm hit. Nothing left but ashes. Madeline sat heavily, the news stealing her breath. Burned down. Was anyone hurt? No casualties, thank God, but Howie lost everything. Last I heard, he was heading to California to stay with his brother. I see, Madeline whispered, her tenuous plans crumbling before her eyes. Without the promised job and lodging, she had nowhere to go and precious little money left. The sheriff, sensing her distress, changed the subject, discussing local news with Gabe while Madeline sat in stunned silence. When he left 20 minutes later, he paused at the door. Mrs. Zimmerman, if you need assistance, the church ladies in Rawhide are good-hearted folk. They might help you get settled. He glanced between her and Gabe, a knowing look in his eyes. Though seems to me you've landed in good hands already. After he'd gone, Madeline remained at the table, Emma babbling happily in her lap, oblivious to her mother's turmoil. What will you do now? Gabe asked quietly, still standing by the door. Madeline shook her head helplessly. I don't know. I have some money saved, but not enough to establish myself with no prospects. Shame colored her cheeks as she admitted, I have nowhere to go. Gabe was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he crossed the room and sat across from her, his hands folded on the table. Stay, he said simply. Madeline looked up sharply. What? Stay here, with me. His voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the vulnerability beneath his composed exterior. This place, it's been just a house since Sarah left. You and Emma, you've made it a home again. Gabe, Madeline began, her heart racing, you barely know me. I know enough, he countered. I know you're strong, you survived a blizzard to protect your daughter. I know you're skilled, I've seen your cooking and sewing. I know you're kind, you mended my clothes without being asked and listened to my stories without judgment. He paused, then added softly, and I know I haven't felt this alive in years. Madeline felt tears gathering in her eyes. Are you offering charity or something else? Gabe reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. Something else, he admitted. I'm not a man of fancy words, Madeline, but what I said that night in the snow, I meant it. You and Emma, you're mine to care for if you'll let me. And if I stay, Madeline asked carefully, what would I be to you, your housekeeper? You're my wife, he interrupted, the words rushed as if he feared losing his courage. If you'll have me. Not right away we'd court proper, give you time to know your own mind, but that's where I'd hope we'd end up. Emma chose that moment to reach for Gabe, her small hands opening and closing in the familiar gesture of wanting to be held. Without hesitation, he took her, settling her comfortably in the crook of his arm where she immediately began playing with the buttons on his shirt. She knows who saved her, Madeline said softly. Children sense these things. And her mother, Gabe asked, his eyes intent on Madeline's face. What does she sense? Madeline took a deep breath, honesty compelling her forward. That I've found a good man. That I'm drawn to you in ways that surprise me. She twisted her wedding ring absently. I didn't expect to feel this way again, especially so soon after Thomas. I'm not asking you to forget him, Gabe assured her, just to make room in your heart for someone new. Madeline considered his offer, weighing practicality against the unexpected feelings blossoming within her. It wouldn't be proper, she said finally. People would talk. Let them, Gabe replied with a shrug. Sheriff Wilson's already seen you here and news travels fast. Besides, he added with the hint of a smile, ranching's lonely work. Plenty of couples out here get together quick when it's right. And you think this is right? Madeline asked, needing his certainty to bolster her own. Gabe looked down at Emma, then back to Madeline, his expression softening. The night I found you, I'd been praying for a sign that I wasn't meant to be alone forever. Then there you were in the snow, you and this little one, like an answer. He reached for Madeline's hand again. Feels like Providence to me. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within Madeline. She'd come west seeking security for herself and Emma, but had found something far more precious, the possibility of love again. I need time, she said finally. To be sure, Gabe nodded, relief evident in his face. Time you shall have. But you'll stay, Madeline smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in months. We'll stay. True to his word, Gabe courted Madeline properly over the coming weeks, showing restraint and respect that only deepened her growing feelings for him. He moved to sleep in the barn despite her protests, insisting that her reputation would remain intact while under his roof. In mid-February, he took her and Emma to Rawhide for the first time, proudly introducing Madeline to the townsfolk as his special friend and Emma as the little lady of the ranch. The sheriff's wife, a matronly woman with kind eyes, pulled Madeline aside during their visit. Gabe York's a good man, she said without preamble. Lost his parents young, fought bravely in the war, built his ranch from nothing. The way he looks at you, I've never seen him look at anyone that way. I care for him deeply, Madeline admitted. Then don't make him wait too long, the older woman advised with a knowing smile. Men like that are rare as gold nuggets out here. By March, the snow had receded enough for regular travel and spring was awakening the land. Gabe had business in Carson City and reluctantly prepared for the 3-day journey. I could come with you, Madeline suggested as he packed. He shook his head. Roads are still rough and I'll be pushing hard to make it back quick. His eyes softened as he looked at her. I don't like leaving you, though. We'll be fine, she assured him, though the thought of his absence created a hollow feeling in her chest. Emma and I are quite capable of managing for a few days. Gabe nodded but hesitated before saying, Been thinking, Madeline. When I get back, might be time for me to build that addition to the house I've been planning. A proper family room. The implication was clear and warmth bloomed in Madeline's cheeks. That sounds lovely, she replied, not trusting herself to say more. The morning of his departure, Gabe lingered on the porch, clearly reluctant to leave. Emma was balanced on his hip, her small hands patting his cheeks as if memorizing his face. 3 days, he promised. 4 at most. We'll be counting the hours, Madeline said. Something in her tone made him pause, his blue eyes searching hers. Madeline, she stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and with Emma still cradled between them, rose on tiptoes to press her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, tentative, but filled with promise. When she pulled back, Gabe's expression was one of wonder and barely contained joy. What was that for? He asked hoarsely. Something to remember on the trail, she replied with a small smile, and a promise for when you return. He touched her cheek reverently. I'll hold you to that promise, Madeline Zimmerman. After he'd ridden away, Madeline stood watching until he disappeared over the ridge, Emma babbling happily in her arms. The kiss had been impulsive, but it had felt right, like finally acknowledging what had been growing between them since that snowy night. The days of Gabe's absence passed slowly. Madeline kept busy with household tasks and caring for Emma, who was now crawling enthusiastically and attempting to pull herself up on furniture. In the evenings, she sat by the fire and worked on a special project, a new shirt for Gabe, made from fabric she'd found in town on their last visit. On the morning of the 4th day, Madeline woke with anticipation fluttering in her stomach. Gabe had promised to return by today, and she had prepared accordingly, baking his favorite apple pie and making sure the house was spotless. Midday came and went with no sign of him. By evening, worry had begun to gnaw at her. The spring weather was unpredictable and the roads could be treacherous. She put Emma to bed and then sat by the window, straining to hear the sound of hoofbeats in the gathering darkness. When she finally heard a horse approaching, Madeline rushed to the door, relief washing over her. But it wasn't Gabe who dismounted in the yard, it was Sheriff Wilson, his expression grave. "Mrs. Zimmerman," he greeted her, removing his hat. Cold dread pooled in Madeline's stomach. "What's happened? Is it Gabe?" The sheriff nodded grimly. "There was trouble in Carson City, bank robbery gone wrong. Gabe was there conducting his business when it happened." "Is he?" Madeline couldn't finish the question, terror closing her throat. "He's alive," the sheriff assured her quickly, "but he's been shot. Doctor in Carson City patched him up, but he's in no condition to travel. He asked me to come tell you personally so you wouldn't worry." Madeline sagged against the door frame, relief and fresh fear warring within her. "How bad is it?" Bullet caught him in the shoulder. "Lost blood, but the doc says if infection doesn't set in, he should recover fully." The sheriff hesitated, then added, "He's asking for you, madam. Said to tell you he's sorry about the family room." Tears sprang to Madeline's eyes at this evidence of Gabe's thoughts being with her even in his pain. "I need to go to him," she said decisively. "Figured you'd say that," the sheriff replied with a small smile. "My wife's waiting at our place in town. She'll mind the little one while I take you to Carson City first thing tomorrow." "Thank you," Madeline whispered, overwhelmed by the kindness of these people who had become her community. That night, after packing what she would need for the journey, Madeline knelt beside her bed and prayed fervently for Gabe's recovery. She was surprised to realize how completely he had become the center of her world in such a short time. The thought of losing him was unbearable. "Please," she whispered into the darkness, "let him be all right. I haven't told him yet that I love him." The journey to Carson City was long and difficult, even with Sheriff Wilson's escort. They left Emma in the capable hands of Mrs. Wilson, who had raised 6 children of her own and assured Madeline that one more little angel would be no trouble. Carson City was larger and busier than Madeline had expected, with proper streets lined with substantial buildings. The doctor's office was located near the center of town, a well-maintained 2-story structure with Dr. James Rutherford, physician and surgeon, painted on the door. The doctor himself greeted them, a middle-aged man with spectacles and a reassuring manner. "Mrs. York," he said, assuming a relationship that Madeline didn't correct. "Your husband's been asking for you. He's stubborn as a mule, that one. Tried to get out of bed this morning to come find you himself." "That sounds like Gabe," Madeline said with a watery smile. "How is he truly?" "The bullet went clean through the muscle of his left shoulder," Dr. Rutherford explained. "Missed anything vital, thankfully. He's lost blood and is weak, but with proper care and rest, he should make a full recovery." "May I see him?" "Of course. This way." The doctor led her to a small, clean room at the back of his office. Gabe was lying in a narrow bed, his left shoulder heavily bandaged, his face pale against the white pillowcase. His eyes were closed, but they opened immediately when Madeline entered. "Maddie," he breathed, using the nickname she hadn't heard since Thomas died. "You came." "Of course I came," she replied, moving swiftly to his bedside and taking his right hand in both of hers. "Did you think I wouldn't?" A weak smile touched his lips. "Hoped you would, didn't want to presume." Sheriff Wilson and the doctor tactfully withdrew, leaving them alone. Madeline sat on the edge of the bed, still holding Gabe's hand. "You gave me quite a scare," she admonished gently. "The sheriff said you were caught in a bank robbery," Gabe nodded, wincing slightly at the movement. "Wrong place, wrong time. 2 men came in shooting. One of them aimed at the teller, a young woman. I pushed her out of the way." "Of course you did," Madeline said, her heart swelling with pride and affection. It was so typical of him to risk himself for a stranger. "Got a reward for my trouble," Gabe continued, a hint of his usual dry humor returning. "Bank managers covering the doctor's bills and gave me a bonus besides. Could build 2 family rooms now." "I don't care about family rooms," Madeline said, tears threatening again. "I care about you coming home safely." Gabe's blue eyes searched her face. "Home," he repeated softly. "Is that what it is to you now, Maddie? My ranch our home?" "Yes," she admitted without hesitation. It became home when you invited us to stay. When you made room in your life for a widow and her child without asking anything in return. I asked something, he reminded her, squeezing her hand. I asked for your heart, and you have it, Madeline whispered, leaning forward to press her forehead against his. I love you, Gabriel York. I think I have since that night in the snow. Joy illuminated his face despite his pallor. Say it again, he requested hoarsely. I love you, Madeline repeated, her voice stronger. When the sheriff told me you were hurt, I realized how foolish I'd been to wait so long to tell you. Worth getting shot for then, Gabe murmured, his free hand coming up to touch her cheek. Don't joke about that, Madeline scolded, but she couldn't maintain her stern expression in the face of his tender gaze. Marry me, Maddie, Gabe said suddenly, all traces of humor gone. Not someday, now. As soon as I can stand up straight. Madeline's heart leapt at the urgency in his voice. Are you proposing to me from a sick but Gabriel York? Seems as good a place as any, he replied with a flash of his old grin. I've learned life's too short and precious to waste time. I love you. I love Emma. I want us to be a family officially, properly. Madeline considered the man before her this strong, gentle soul who had saved her and Emma from certain death, who had opened his home and heart to them, who had risked his life to save a stranger. The answer was as clear as the spring sky outside. Yes, she said simply. I'll marry you as soon as you're well enough to stand beside me. The smile that broke across Gabe's face was like sunrise after the longest night. He pulled her down for a kiss that, despite his weakened condition, left no doubt about the depth of his feelings. Mrs. Wilson's watching Emma, Madeline told him when they parted. She sends her love and strict instructions for you to behave and heal quickly. Gabe chuckled. That sounds like Harriet. How long can you stay? Sheriff Wilson needs to return to Rawhide tomorrow, but I'll stay until you're well enough to travel home, Madeline replied firmly. I've already spoken with Dr. Rutherford and he's directed me to a respectable boarding house nearby. Always practical, Gabe murmured approvingly. One of the many things I love about you. Dr. Rutherford insisted that Gabe remain under his care for at least a week to ensure the wound healed properly without infection. During that time, Madeline spent her days at his bedside, reading to him, talking about their future and helping him regain his strength. In the evenings at the boarding house run by a no-nonsense widow named Mrs. Daniels, Madeline wrote long letters to Emma, which Mrs. Wilson promised to read to the child each night. She also made arrangements for their wedding, visiting Carson City's small church and speaking with the pastor. By the end of the week, Gabe was able to sit up and even walk short distances, though his left arm remained in a sling. Dr. Rutherford pronounced him fit enough to travel back to Rawhide, provided he continued to rest and avoid strenuous activity for at least a month. And no wedding night exertions for at least 2 weeks, the doctor added with a pointed look at both of them, causing Madeline to blush furiously and Gabe to cough in embarrassment. Before they left Carson City, they stood together in the simple church with Dr. Rutherford and Mrs. Daniels as witnesses and exchanged vows. Madeline wore her best dress, a modest blue affair that matched Gabe's eyes, and carried a small bouquet of spring wildflowers. Gabe, still pale but standing tall and proud, wore a new shirt that Madeline had finished sewing during her evenings at the boarding house. I, Gabriel James York, take you, Madeline Ann Zimmerman, to be my lawfully wedded wife, he vowed, his voice steady and sure. To have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. When it was her turn, Madeline's voice trembled slightly with emotion. I, Madeline Ann Zimmerman, take you, Gabriel James York, to be my lawfully wedded husband. To have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. The pastor smiled benevolently as he pronounced them husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Mr. York. Gabe's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, his good arm encircling Madeline's waist to draw her close. When they parted, the look they shared spoke volumes about the journey that had brought them to this moment and the future they would build together. The return journey to Rawhide was taken slowly, with frequent stops to allow Gabe to rest. Sheriff Wilson had arranged for a comfortable wagon with a spring seat, which made the travel easier on Gabe's healing shoulder. As they approached Rawhide after 2 days on the road, Madeline's excitement grew. She had missed Emma terribly and couldn't wait to hold her daughter again, their daughter now, in every way that mattered. They arrived at the Wilson home in the late afternoon. Mrs. Wilson opened the door before they could knock, Emma balanced on her ample hip. "There she is." The older woman exclaimed, "Your mama's back, little one." Emma's face lit up at the sight of Madeline, her arms stretching out eagerly. But when she spotted Gabe behind Madeline, she surprised them all by calling out clearly. "Pa." Madeline froze, tears springing to her eyes. She turned to see Gabe's reaction and found him equally moved, his blue eyes suspiciously bright. "Did you teach her that?" he asked Mrs. Wilson in a choked voice. The sheriff's wife shook her head, smiling. "Not deliberate-like. Been showing her a picture book with families in it, pointing out mamas and papas. Must have made the connection herself, smart little thing that she is." Gabe stepped forward, his good arm outstretched to Emma. "That's right, little bit," he said softly. "I'm your papa now." Emma went to him without hesitation, settling comfortably against his right side and patting his cheek with familiar affection. The moment was so perfect, so right, that Madeline had to bite her lip to keep from weeping openly. "Well, don't just stand there in the doorway, Mrs. Wilson scolded gently. "Come in and tell us everything. The whole town's been waiting to hear how you're faring, Gabe York." Inside, over tea and Mrs. Wilson's famous apple cake, they shared the news of their marriage. The Wilsons were delighted but hardly surprised. "About time," the sheriff declared gruffly. "Knew from the moment I saw you two together that it was heading this way." "We're very happy for you both," Mrs. Wilson added, beaming at them, "and for little Emma getting herself a proper papa." It was late afternoon when they finally headed home to the ranch, Emma sleeping peacefully in Madeline's arms as Gabe drove the wagon. As they crested the final ridge and the cabin came into view, golden in the late sunlight, Madeline felt a profound sense of rightness wash over her. "Welcome home, Mrs. York," Gabe said softly, reaching across to take her hand. "Home," Madeline repeated, squeezing his fingers. "It sounds perfect." Spring bloomed fully across the Nevada landscape as Gabe's shoulder healed and they settled into life as a family. True to his word, he began work on the addition to the cabin as soon as Dr. Rutherford gave him permission for physical activity, a spacious family room with large windows to capture the mountain views. Madeline found unexpected joy in being Gabe's wife. He was a considerate and passionate husband, a doting father to Emma, and a partner who valued her opinions and included her in all decisions regarding the ranch. The initial attraction that had drawn them together deepened into something profound and enduring as they faced the daily challenges and celebrations of their shared life. In late April, a letter arrived from California from Gabe's sister Sarah. She wrote that she had heard of his injury and subsequent marriage from a mutual acquaintance who had passed through Carson City. "She wants to visit," Gabe told Madeline that evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Says she and the children miss Nevada and she wants to meet you and Emma." Madeline noted the conflicting emotions in his voice. "And how do you feel about that?" Gabe was silent for a long moment. "There were harsh words when she left," he admitted. "I accused her of abandoning the home we'd built together, of choosing a stranger over family." "You were hurt," Madeline observed gently. "I was," he agreed. "But looking back, I understand better now. She was young, widowed with 2 small children. Harold, her new husband, offered security, a comfortable life in the city." He glanced at Madeline. "Not unlike what I offered you, I suppose." "Then you should welcome her visit," Madeline said, reaching for his hand. "Heal that breach for everyone's sake," Gabe nodded slowly. "I'll write back tomorrow, Tell her to come in June when the weather's more reliable for travel. The York Ranch flourished that summer. Gabe's careful breeding program produced several promising foals, and word spread about the quality of his horses, bringing new customers from as far away as San Francisco. Madeline, drawing on her seamstress skills, began taking commissions from local women for special occasion dresses and wedding gowns, providing a modest but satisfying additional income. In early June, Sarah arrived with her children and husband, a pleasant, prosperous-looking man who clearly adored his wife and stepchildren. The reunion between brother and sister was initially tense, but quickly warmed as they rediscovered their deep familial bond. Matthew and Rebecca were delighted to meet their new cousin Emma and thrilled to be back on the ranch where they could ride horses and explore the countryside. Sarah and Madeline formed an immediate connection, becoming confidantes and friends over the 2-week visit. "You've been good for my brother," Sarah told Madeline one afternoon as they prepared dinner together. "I've never seen him so at peace." "He saved us," Madeline replied simply. "Emma and me, not just from the snow that night, but from a life of uncertainty and struggle." "And you saved him right back," Sarah observed shrewdly. "From loneliness and that stubborn self-sufficiency that would have seen him grow old alone." On the family's last evening, before returning to California, they gathered around a bonfire under the star-filled Nevada sky. The children roasted marshmallows while the adults shared stories and plans for the future. "You should come visit us in Sacramento," Harold invited. "The children would love to show Emma the city." "Perhaps next spring," Gabe agreed, his arm around Madeline's waist. "We have some news that might make travel difficult this fall and winter." All eyes turned to them expectantly. Madeline felt a blush rise to her cheeks as Gabe continued with obvious pride. "We're expecting a baby in January," he announced. "Doctor confirmed it last week." Sarah's squeal of delight and Harold's hearty congratulations were nearly drowned out by Matthew and Rebecca's excited questions about their new cousin-to-be. In the joyful chaos that followed, Madeline caught Gabe's eye across the fire, their shared happiness a tangible thing between them. Later that night, after everyone had retired to bed, Sarah's family in the newly completed addition, Gabe and Madeline stood on the porch, his arms encircling her from behind, his hands resting gently on the barely perceptible swell of her belly. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "More than I ever thought possible," Madeline replied truthfully. "If someone had told me a year ago that I would be here married to a wonderful man, Emma thriving, another child on the way, I wouldn't have believed them." "Life takes unexpected turns," Gabe reflected. "When I rode out that night to check on my mare, I never imagined I'd find my future in a snowbank." Madeline turned in his arms to face him. "Do you remember what you said when you found us? You're both mine now." "It should have frightened me, but instead, it made me feel safe for the first time in so long." "I meant it," Gabe said, his expression serious. "From that very first moment, something in me recognized you, both of you, as mine to protect, to cherish. Like you were the missing pieces I hadn't known I was searching for." "And now?" Madeline asked, her hands coming to rest on his chest. His smile was tender as he covered her hands with his own. "Now you're mine in every way that matters, by law, by choice, by love. And I am yours, completely and forever." "Forever," Madeline echoed, rising on tiptoes to kiss him under the vast Nevada sky, their future stretching before them as boundless and promising as the frontier itself. Winter returned to Nevada, but this time Madeline welcomed it without fear. The York Ranch was now a thriving enterprise, with Gabe's horses in high demand and Madeline's dressmaking business growing steadily. Emma, now 15 months old, was walking and talking, a sunny presence who adored her papa and eagerly awaited the arrival of her sibling. On a snowy January evening in 1873, almost exactly 1 year after Gabe had found Madeline and Emma in the blizzard, their son was born. They named him Thomas Gabriel York, honoring both Madeline's first husband and the man who had become father to his child. As Madeline nursed their newborn son in the bedroom that now held so many happy memories, Gabe sat beside her on the bed, Emma curled sleepily in his lap. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion as he gazed at his wife and son. "For what?" Madeline asked, looking up with a tired smile, "For completing our family, for giving me more love than I ever thought I'd know." Madeline reached out to touch his face, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain all she felt. "We found each other when we needed it most," she said softly. "Some might call it chance, but I believe it was something like destiny." Outside, snow fell gently, blanketing the land in pristine white, but inside the York home, all was warmth and light and love, a family forged in a winter storm, now unbreakable and complete. As the years passed, the story of how Gabe had found Madeline and Emma in the snow became family legend, retold on birthdays and anniversaries, embellished slightly with each telling but never losing its essential truth. That love could be found in the most desperate of circumstances, and that sometimes, being claimed by the right person at the right moment could change the entire course of a life. Emma grew into a beautiful and confident young woman with her mother's gentle spirit and her adoptive father's quiet strength. Young Thomas inherited his father's affinity for horses and his mother's creative eye for detail. And 3 years after Thomas's birth, the family welcomed another daughter, Sarah Ann, named for Gabe's sister, who remained a beloved presence in their lives despite the distance. The York Ranch prospered and expanded, becoming one of the most respected horse breeding operations in Nevada. Madeline's dressmaking evolved into a small but successful business, with women traveling from surrounding communities for her exquisite work. Together, they built a legacy of hard work, integrity, and abiding love that touched all who knew them. And on winter nights, when the snow fell thick and the wind howled across the valley, Gabe and Madeline would sit by the fire in the family room he had built for them, their children gathered around, and remember with wonder and gratitude how their story began with a desperate woman, a tiny child, a snowstorm, and a cowboy's promise. "You're both mine now."